What is going on? We have both Lukas and Kennedy being shot at by possibly a drone. We have finally met Per Stensen, and we've seen our first footage of the silos being built. And the best part is that's the tip of the iceberg in terms of things that have happened in this episode. What I also want to discuss today is the little ebook that Apple has recently released called The Mystery of the PEZ by Robert Sims. If you do like the sound of that and you want to hear me read it, below there is a link to my Patreon. It's on the free section. I did a little audiobook reading of all the 13 diary entries, as well as provided my thoughts as to what I feel about these sacred relics. As I said, if you like the sound of that and want to check it out, there will be a link below in the top comment and also in the description. Right, let's get on into it, shall we? Here is a breakdown of episode 7. So, as we know, Camille has been catching on to what Robert has been up to, and he's basically got people following him all the way around the silo. Jules breaks the news to Lukas and Patrick Kennedy that they are going to be going outside. It's going to be their job to go to silo 17 and not only get the kids, but also check to find where the safeguard pipe is and how to block it. They're not particularly thrilled, shall I say, although I think Lukas is more annoyed that he has to go outside with Patrick Kennedy. They come to the agreement he just needs to get Lukas to silo 17 and then technically he can wander off and do whatever he wants. Robert Sims gets a message to Jules and then they meet and he explains to her that the vitamin D plus is already in the water supply. Whatever she is planning on doing, she needs to do it now. Though it's only a very small scene, I loved seeing Sims and Jules just talk one-on-one without kind of shouting or being threatened by each other. It's just something, if you think back to season 2, I never thought we'd see something like this. Some of the outsiders, including Kathleen Billings, come to check on Lukas and Patrick to try and work out what's going on. It's interesting here to me, Kathleen almost seems closer and more devoted to Patrick than she does Billings. We actually haven't seen any sort of healthy scenes between those two. We're already seeing Robert and Camille fall apart. I'm wondering if we're going to see the sheriff and his wife fall apart as well. We also see Patrick is still determined to prove that it's lush and green outside. The others are losing faith and they're more likely to listen to Jules and Lukas, but I don't think Patrick is. I think he's too stubborn on this. We also hear more about his wife, which of course we did hear some anecdotes about back in season 2. Although the two of them were planning to go out at dawn, Jules barges in and explains to Danny that he needs to shut the cafeteria down now and that they need to go out as soon as possible. Now, there is just one mic in Lukas's helmet, and Walk is explaining to him that Lukas is going to be the one that is communicating back with everyone in Silo 18. They're going to be using the radio system that Walker was working on, and so that nobody knows what's going on, they're going to be talking in code. If it wasn't eerie enough seeing Jules walk out there at the beginning of season 2, walking over all these dead bodies in the middle of a completely barren wilderness, it's even worse in the dark. It's windy and dusty and all you can see is just the stars in the night sky and a bunch of dirt. It is so terrifying. I think as well seeing them in those suits, I mean, it feels like they're exploring like an alien planet, which I suppose to them, they are. What I love is the complete contradiction of their experience. Lukas is enamoured, completely amazed. Everything is far bigger than he could have ever perceived it to be, and he finally gets a good look at those stars that he's been so obsessed with. And then for Kennedy, to him, there's nothing. It's just empty space, there's no lushness, there's no green, and for him it's a complete disappointment. Just the fact the two of them are looking at the same landscape, but both having a completely different perception of it. The boys work their way up the verge, and then look down on all of the remains of the people of Silo 17. We get a brief shot of Camille falling asleep in her living room, and the server key is lighting up again. Next thing we know, outside, we start hearing a loud buzzing noise. Just as they're asking if those on the radio can hear it too, they start getting shot at. The next thing we know, the line has gone completely dead, and there's no sign of life. What we need to do is work out exactly how whoever is monitoring the outside saw Patrick and Lukas. I'm going to go over that more and in depth in the theory section at the end. Camille walks into the vault where the algorithm explains to her that Lukas Kyle and Patrick Kennedy have been neutralised. The algorithm then asks Camille if she saw an unedited video of Juliet's cleaning, and it asks her what she saw within that. She says bodies. The algorithm then says, and what does that tell you? We know Silo 17 managed to block the safeguard, and now the algorithm and Camille knows too. She goes to Juliet's apartment to ask her why Patrick and Lukas went out early. Jules lies and says that Kennedy was restless, so she had to send them out. At this point, Camille tells Jules that the two of them are dead. She also asks, is there any other reason why you wanted to send them to Silo 17? And Jules, yet again, stands firm and says no, there is no other reason. The two of them are clutching onto guns at this point, by the way, so you can tell that these two at some point might have to have another standoff with each other. Jules asks why they died, and Camille says, suit malfunctions. And that's basically what happens when you rush. Juliet says, yeah, we should have given it more time to make them bulletproof. Now, if Camille is as smart as we think she is, she might be able to put together that Jules and maybe other people were able to hear what was going on outside. As far as we know at this point in the episode, Lukas and Kennedy have just been murdered by a drone or helicopter or something of the sort. But the algorithm may have probably lied to Camille, and she might be the only one that's in the dark. Billings is still working on the Orla Kent murder investigation, and he goes down to the mines to speak to Harwood. And of course, Hank is tagging along as well. Poor Hank, he looks more and more dishevelled every single episode. Remember, during episode 6, him and Hank went to the security room with Emerson, and that's where they saw Glenda, basically in 2 different places, all within the same 10 minutes. Clearly very smug, but also a little bit threatened, he goes into ultra defensive mode and doesn't want to spill any of the beans to the sheriff. Ed Harwood is this character that we've only really recently been truly introduced to, but already he's very intriguing to me. He's very smug and very confident, and I think that's because he knows the sheriff can't really do anything to him. Billings has no real leg to stand on here. He's just throwing questions at Ed Harwood, but of course Ed Harwood's giving nothing back because he has no respect for him. It's very clear to see that Ed Harwood is somehow involved in all of this to do with Orla Kent, but possibly even the critical supply issue as well. Meanwhile, Jules makes her way down to Walker's workshop. One simple look at Bernard, and already he can tell that something has gone wrong. Teddy is explaining to Juliet that basically they could attach explosives to the pipe in Judicial and blow it up. They have these fire suits and the helmets that would allow 6 of them to get away before the poison takes over. What's interesting to me is the parallels here. Up top, we have Camille as the main decision maker, and down below, we have Jules as the other one. The algorithm is the guiding voice for Camille, but it's almost like Bernard has become the guiding voice for Juliet. She hates the fact that she has this weight on her shoulders and that she's the one that has to make this decision. They're going to be blowing up a very residential area of the silo. It's probably going to kill anywhere between 1,000, maybe even 2,000 people. In her mind, what Bernard is trying to get her to weigh up is the mental death of 10,000 people or the possible physical death of somewhere around 1,000. When Teddy says the words, "Should we vote on this?" Bernard sits up and says no. The people have already voted when they voted Juliet for mayor. Now, why is this important? We know the algorithm in some ways manipulates Camille. Well, Bernard is actually doing the same thing here a little bit to Juliet. We know that people didn't necessarily just vote for Juliet. They did it because somebody in the crowd basically already started that line of thinking. And that person was directly planted there by Robert Sims, a tactic that Bernard himself has used in previous parts of the show. In this moment, he's trying to get into Juliet's head in the same way that the algorithm is trying to get into Camille's. Now, remember, during last episode, Knox went down to the mines to speak to Ed Harwood. That's where he got word that his dad had died working down there around about 2 years ago. Knox doesn't quite believe this, and he goes to speak to Mark Chambers. He asks him, "How did my dad die? And was he murdered?" Mark says, "No, that's because he's not dead." He says someone died in the mines, but it wasn't your father. Apparently, he heard that Knox's dad designed something for Ed Harwood, and that whoever was to next die in the mines didn't actually die, and that his dad took his place. Knox asks what was the name of the man that died, and Mark is very standoffish, saying, "Do not go looking into Ed Harwood's business because you're probably going to wind up dead." Knox persists and asks again what was the man's name. It then cuts before we get to hear it. Back in Walker's workshop, Bernard has asked for Regina Jackson. He's looking specifically for a relic, something called the Mission Diary. He says, if you know who has it, please, it's a matter of urgency, bring them here. Bernard explains to Jules that they have a visitor, someone very important. Actually, the only someone who is ever really going to understand her memory loss because she has gone through it herself. They walk inside, and who's there? It's Gloria Hildebrandt. You can even see it in my reaction. I was so happy to see Gloria. I absolutely adore this character, and it's probably up there with some of my favourite scenes from the show, when they was in the medical bay and she was holding the baby, discussing with Juliet about the flame keepers. It was just a beautiful episode within season 1. She's so intelligent and smart, and also incredibly well played by Sophie Thompson. I'm just so happy we've got to see another scene with this character in season 3. Bernard starts explaining the concept of sacred relics, and there is more about this within the Sims diary entries and that little ebook that Apple released. Again, if you want to hear me read it, it's on the Patreon. In her hands, Gloria is holding a book, the Mission Diary. Now, this isn't about a mission. Mission is their name. They were a porter who lived in the silo around 140 years ago. Bernard explains that when he was working as the head of IT, him and Sims used to look for sacred relics, relics that were deemed more important than others, for whatever the reason may be. 2 specifically that Bernard mentions here is the Mission Diary and another which he describes as a spiral-bound notebook. Now, I'm wondering if this is Helen's notebook that we have been getting glimpses of in the before times. I must say thank you to one of my patrons who pointed that out to me. Gloria starts to read from the diary, and it's absolutely heartbreaking. You're beginning to hear the account of this person who is losing their memory. They have scars on their bodies that they can't remember where they got it from. They even explain how people who are living alone have actually forgotten to eat. They even had to install nets because people were throwing themselves off the walkways. Mission here talks of somebody called Ali, how much they love them, and that if they ever lost them, they would throw themselves over the railings as well. And that's their final entry. Bernard is using this to get a message across to Jules. She thinks the vitamin D plus and the memory suppression is the right way of doing things because nobody dies. What he's trying to say is, in some ways, the whole silo dies. There is even more tension brewing at the Sims household. Welcome back to Keeping Up with the Sims. Now they're arguing about Anthony's jacket because he basically has a school portrait day. We also see a little painting on the wall. I'm assuming that this is just of Anthony because they were talking about his last school portrait. But the reason I'm pointing this out is because in the book we learn that when Robert Sims was at school, he was in the class of Anne Wilkins, George Wilkins' mother. Some lovely little details adding up there. We're learning about Anthony's school life and also Robert Sims. After Camille storms off, there's a knock at the door and Sandy is there. She's asking for judicial passes and that Juliet needs them. Sims encourages Anthony to take the jacket to school. And there's a reason why. As the episode goes on, we see that Sandy gets a second replacement jacket. That way, she can place the judicial passes in another jacket and send that one down to Walker's workshop. Anthony comes home from school, angry because he had to take his jacket and he didn't want to. I don't know why they don't get him a little leather jacket so he can match his dad. That'd be very cute. But anyway, he throws it on the floor, but Camille notices. She says that her and him need to go to judicial seclusion because they need to talk about something. All the while, the 6 of them are walking the explosives to judicial. They alert Jules, who now has an important decision to make. Either to blow up the judge and the head of IT, as well as probably 1,000 other people, or call off the mission. Jules is adamant that she shouldn't do this, but Bernard says, is there another opportunity? I think he has huge admiration and respect for Robert, but in this moment, he's kind of thinking of the greater good, I suppose. They work their way through and they start putting the explosives on the pipes. Camille takes Robert to one of the seclusion cells, and inside is Amy, the nurse who helped save Jules. Poor Carla, who's losing her wits at this point, is debating drinking the tap water and forgetting everything. Bernard tells her no. A voice comes through on the radio, but it's not Teddy. it's Patrick Kennedy. Him and possibly Lukas are still alive. Maybe they took shelter in Silo 17. Frantically, Walker tries to tell Teddy and the rest of them to stop the explosives. They don't need to do this anymore if they know that possibly the other two have made it to Silo 17. Just in case this episode wasn't stressful enough, they're now frantically trying to defuse bombs to stop blowing up 1,000 people. Juliet at this point looks like she needed a lie down, as did I, and Bernard asked Walker if she has a strong drink that he could use. She's angry at him for using their son and getting him almost involved in all of this. Robert at this point says to her, if you could just stop putting the vitamin D plus in the water supply, and Camille begins to lose it. Robert asks if they can go somewhere else and not do this in front of Amy, and at this point Camille pulls out the gun and threatens to shoot her. Her defense in this moment is, oh, like you haven't done anything worse than killing someone? Of course, we all know that Robert has probably had to kill many people under the work of Bernard. But he puts it to her in this way, let Anthony have a parent that doesn't end up killing anyone. The Before Times kicks off just as we left it in the last episode. Helen and Daniel are walking with the grey-haired man and Thurman back into the hangar where Victor Cernkovich, Anna Thurman and Charlotte walk towards them. Daniel, of course, asks her if she's okay or if she even knows who he is, and she says, of course, Daniel, I know who you are. The eeriest part of first of all this is Charlotte is basically saying, you just need to sign some papers and then you can follow me and Anna through here. And of course, Helen and Daniel are still super defensive and confused as to what's even going on. Behind those doors is a lot of lawyers, and they're being encouraged to sign non-disclosure agreements basically in order to get the information that they want. In this moment, a bratty billionaire, I don't know if there's any unbratty billionaires, but a bratty billionaire walks through, and we finally get to meet Per Stensen. There's a moment where he poses a question to Daniel and Helen and basically says, which would you rather? Walk back out of here, drive home and never know what's behind those doors, or sign it and get all the information that you want? And the tone of it is so algorithmic and robotic. It is like Daniel and Helen are talking to a Before Times algorithm. It's really eerie. Charlotte herself even admits to signing this NDA. And because Daniel wants to know what happened to her as much as she does, he signs it too. Helen at this point kind of doesn't really have a choice, and she chooses to go along with it all as well. For me, I loved this scene. There was something just so crazy about seeing every single one of these characters from the Before Times all in the same aircraft hangar, and it only gets even better from here. Daniel and Charlotte are having a little catch-up, a little chat, and she explains that Victor Cernkovich wanted some of her memories, specifically the 2 weeks before the Iran mission, to come back. There's a weird sort of essence here of like Stockholm Syndrome. I'm just saying that because I don't really have a better phrase to describe it. She's saying, Victor really helped me kind of get my memory back, and Daniel has to go, yeah, but he's also the one that's took the memory away. There's this interesting thing here where Charlotte seems very content and happy, and Daniel really isn't. Neither is Helen, by the way, who has her head in her hands at this point, and I don't blame her. The grey-haired man talks to her and asks her if she can't sleep. She jokes and says, oh, me and Daniel slept in the back of the minivan, which he says, no, you didn't, because we heard everything. Safe to say that these guys were behind the advertisement that Daniel saw for the minivan in the first place. Helen asks him, how did you even get working for Senator Thurman? He says how he created a firm or a business at some point in time and that didn't work out, and now his job is to keep both Anna and Senator Thurman safe. Whatever the hell that means. He sort of says that his business failed because of some character defects and some things that he needed to work on. Another very algorithmic, robotic statement by somebody from the Before Times. Charlotte seems restless and stressed and clearly can't sleep, so Anna Thurman walks over to talk to her. There was a lot of shocking things in this episode, and I think this one's up there. The two of them basically start flirting. I did not see this one happening. I did not see this one coming. I did not see Anna Thurman and Charlotte being into each other. I did not see that coming, but I'm thrilled. In all honesty, I'm very thrilled. So where this is going to escalate to, I don't know. For a show that doesn't really show any sex, there is a lot of sexual tension brewing. I don't know if anyone else is picking up on that. but I am. Also during this scene, Viktor Sernkovich walks over to Daniel to basically apologise for earlier. Daniel, of course, is bewildered. First he thinks Viktor Sernkovich is just Charlotte's doctor, and now he's involved in all this. Sernkovich explains that Charlotte is doing really well and that actually her therapy is going better than expected. Daniel, of course, saying, yes, but what if it doesn't work and we can't bring any of these childhood memories back? Sernkovich saying it will work. He goes on to explain in a little bit more depth about how he lost his wife and his daughter and that it was a traffic accident of his own doing. He heartbreakingly explains that he even held his daughter in his arms while she died. Although he knows that happened because it was written in the EMT report, he can't physically remember it. Everything that he is doing to Charlotte with the memory suppression, all these techniques and therapies, he has done to himself. That's why he's so certain that it will work. What we also learn is this memory suppression is far more malleable than we previously thought. Not only can you plant new memories, like has been spoken about before, but you can also pick and choose within certain events what you want to remember. Helen looks out the window and sees a city skyline. She asks, "Where are we?" And Daniel replies, "We're in Atlanta, Georgia." Per Stensen explains that they are about to go and visit 400 acres of farmland that he has purchased. It's kind of interesting during the scene because they all divide into pairs, not pairs, not the fruit either. Pairs as in like groups of two, you know what I mean. Helen is talking to Per Stensen, and I'm not kidding when I say this, about how he developed the capacity to build a unicorn, mixing like horse DNA with narwhal or something. Just thought I'd add that in. Daniel is off talking to Senator Thurman, and he basically asks her, was this your idea? And she says, no, I'm just a believer, and that she hopes one day Daniel will be a believer too. Charlotte and Anna Thurman, we don't see talking. We just see them go off into a helicopter together. Just going to leave that for you, just ponder on that one. There's also a moment here where Helen sort of smiles at Per Stensen. I'm going to go over that more in a minute because I need to discuss something in the book. Very important. I'd stick around for it if I were you. There is one final scene of episode 7. Daniel and Helen are in the helicopter with Per Stensen and Senator Thurman. Whilst looking out the window, Helen says, "What is that?" And Senator Thurman says, "Daniel knows." And at that point, Daniel is shocked to see that his drill, the one that he designed, is being used to build what we know as the silos. Whew! That was a lot to go over. Right, now let's go into some theories. We heard through the radio system Lukas and Kennedy getting shot at when they were outside. But then, at the end of the episode, we've heard Kennedy's voice. Could Kennedy and Lukas be dead, and the algorithm is somehow sending some communication back to Walker and the rest of the group, simply pretending to be Kennedy? Or the algorithm has lied to Camille. The algorithm said explicitly that Lukas Kyle and Patrick Kennedy have been neutralised. So either the algorithm is faulty and it doesn't know as much as we think it does, or it's lying yet again. The other thing is, how did the server room key light up? It was sending a direct message to Camille, the head of IT, as soon as Patrick Kennedy and Lukas Kyle walked outside. And then, on top of all that, there is a drone or some sort of flying machinery outside that is shooting people down. We now explicitly know this isn't just a case of poison, radioactive fallout, or things outside not being safe. Of course, we know there are 51 silos in total, with Silo 1 essentially being the control panel. Something possibly in Silo 1 sent something out there to kill 2 people. The question I have is, when people obviously are sent out to clean, why have we never seen these things before? Why didn't it in any way stop Juliet from getting into Silo 17 when she was out there for quite a long period of time? I mentioned this in the last analysis vid, but I'll go over it again. Is the voice truly able to control people, or does it just manipulate who it can in order to do the dirty work for it? And then, as a last resort, is it willing to shoot people down? Within this episode, there was something very poignant revealed about the safeguard. So, as far as we know, the silos are safe and the outside is not safe. If the outside killed everybody anyway, why would they need something that kills off all the people in the inside? The only reason it would have that is if the people themselves were the threat. Maybe the outside is survivable or habitable under certain conditions, and the safeguard exists to prevent people from discovering that. In Season 2, Episode 3, when Solo is still inside the vault, he is talking to Juliet about how the people in Silo 17 died. He says everybody was smiling, but then that dust started to blow again, and I think the poison went away for a bit, but it came back. What if this blowing of the dust, or the wind that he is talking about here, is not environmental, but in fact it is the air from propellers of a helicopter or a drone? And instead, what if these people didn't die from the poison, but they actually died from being shot down? Is Patrick Kennedy and Lukas Kyle still alive? Now, as we know with this show, if we haven't truly seen a body, then we have to assume they're still alive, because of course we saw that with Bernard. The question I have is, was it really Patrick Kennedy? The microphone was only in the helmet of Lukas Kyle. We saw that before they went outside. They were only going to be communicating with him. So how is Patrick Kennedy now communicating through Lucas's helmet? Is Juliet actually speaking to him, or is there someone or something else manipulating her by using his voice? Of course, I want it to be that Lukas and Patrick somehow were able to get into Silo 17 before they got shot down, and that they're okay and that we're going to see them again. But I, at this point, don't know if that's the case. What if this AI or algorithm in that moment distracted Juliet by pretending to be Patrick Kennedy so that she wouldn't go through with this blowing up of the safeguard? Like I said, I want the two of them to be alive, but I'm wondering if this is just another manipulation tactic. I don't truly believe this voice is evil. And the more we're discovering about the founders of the silo in the before times as well, I don't believe they inherently are either. I think everybody in this show, from the before times or Silo 18, genuinely believe they're doing the right thing, even if they're not. There's an interesting moment here that Billings has with Harwood. He's talking about a man who used to do magic somewhere down in the mids, and that he was basically punished for doing so. He was even told by Judicial that magic was a theoretical relic. When I first watched this, I thought nothing of it, until I got to this scene with Charlotte and Anna. Charlotte asks her, "What are we going to see?" And Anna replies, "You'd be terrible at a magic show." I don't know why this could even be important, but I thought it was odd that this was in the episode. Now, of course, we have the Billings plotline with Harwood and possibly being involved in the Orla Kent murder, but we haven't really learned any more about that in today's episode. So instead, I'm going to quickly focus on Knox. According to Mark, we can assume that his dad is not dead, and he's basically living outside the system somewhere down in the mines. Mark says that his dad built something for Ed Harwood. The parallels between that and, of course, Daniel and his ideas being used to build the silos is a very, very interesting relation. Another thing I want to mention alongside this is within the Apple ebook. If you want to read the book first or listen to me read it, I highly recommend clicking off now and clicking the link in my Patreon. Like I said, it's completely free and I share a lot of my thoughts there directly while reading it. Here I'm just going to give you a summary of some of the main points and go over what could be most poignant for the show and the events ahead in Season 3. In entry number 9, Robert Sims discusses somebody called Lionel. Now, Lionel was a rebel leader during the rebellion that was around 140 years ago. Now, they're already starting to use memory suppression on him, but during his final judicial tape, they ask him where his wife is, Patricia, and does she have a specific relic. Lionel Nelson responds, "She's 37 weeks, she's almost here, Alexandra." They ask him again, "Where is your wife Patricia? Who is Alexandra? And is she in possession of this relic?" Lionel Nelson repeats, "I don't know." Sims writes about how he believes Patricia Nelson, Lionel's wife, was pregnant at the time, and that she stole someone's identity and moved to a specific apartment, and was also lived in by Anne Wilkins, George Wilkins' mother. Anne Wilkins was Robert Sims's teacher, and he discusses how much he enjoyed being a member of her classroom. Interesting as well, considering we keep seeing Anthony at school throughout this season, and in the book we learn about how Robert Sims was when he was at school. Anne Wilkins made it clear that she wanted her students to be good readers, and Robert Sims explains how that's quite rare. In the silo there are no books, and once you grow up and go on to do all your jobs all over the silo, whether it be supply or mechanical, you don't really need to be very good at reading. And it's probably because she was in the possession of some of these book relics that we've seen in the show and learn even more about in episode 7. We learn that the PEZ duck, as well as some other relics, was also mentioned in Lionel's file. There was a rubber ball, a black and white photograph with a profile of a little face, one patch of cloth, a blue background with a white star, one book for children about somewhere called Georgia, 3 small spiked metal pieces, 1 small notebook with handwritten pages, and 1 cow-shaped stuffed doll. Only 2 of these relics were recovered post-rebellion, the rubber ball and the patch of cloth. The book, as we know, was burnt in the oven by Sheriff Billings. Later in the book, Robert is discussing all this with Bernard in the Digger Void, and we learn a crucial detail. This photograph was a sonogram, or an ultrasound picture, of a baby in the womb, and it's from the before times. Whoever brought the PEZ duck into the silo also brought a sonogram. If Helen is the one who brings the PEZ duck into the silo, then it's highly likely she will be pregnant, which lines up because in the trailer she does look like she could be. So is Helen one of the first people to give birth within the silo, and who is the child's father? Is it Daniel? Is it Per Stensen? Is it the ex-boyfriend that we heard about before? Or is it anyone else? The other interesting relic that stands out to me, and it didn't the first time around, is the small notebook with handwritten pages. I wonder if this is Helen's notebook, the one that we saw earlier in season 3. Is there a chance she took that into the silo and that we're going to see this yet again at some point in time? Just to wrap it up here at the end of probably quite a long analysis video, because this episode was pretty jam-packed with stuff, I did just quickly look at the How Did We Lose This World website. There is 2 copies of the NDAs that Helen and Daniel signed, as well as some screenshots throughout the before times. And then when you click Spiral and take a look at some of the stuff from Silo 18, there's a few interesting photos here. It seems all close-up images from other events that have happened in the previous 2 seasons. So for example, George Wilkins' file, the PEZ duck on the side, the screen outside, and then a couple of close-ups as well of some notes and the sheriff badge, as you can see there. What I also like is there seems to be some behind-the-scenes photos that they've added. Bernard, Solo, another one of Solo, and all the kids in Silo 17. Hank and Billings, Shirley, Knox, and a few others are all in there as well. I'm sure in your own time you could flick through these if you want to. And that's it for today. That's all from me. I think I've covered everything, but if I haven't, do comment it below. I love to read through the comments and see what you guys think as well, and you can always point things out that I might have missed. If you did enjoy this, do give it a thumbs up. It always helps me out. Subscribe, put notifications on. That way you won't miss anything, and I'll see you next week for episode 8. What you can also do, if you have it, is press the hype button. It's completely free, and all it does is allow my channel to be pushed to new people so they can discover my videos. As always, take very good care of yourself, and I'll catch you next time. Toodles!